In the last episode of Garage Noise, I went ahead and straightened a dent in this Toyota Sienna. I talked about some different tools and techniques you can use on your repair. I went ahead and used some glue tabs along with a G90E spot welder. I used a hammer and a shrinking slapper to finish out this repair, and we got this metal shaped and looking like this. Now we're ready for some filler, and the first step is to clean this thoroughly. I'm going to go ahead and use some isopropyl alcohol to wipe this down, remove any oil or contaminants that are on this panel. I've got this metal about 90% straight. For that last 10%, we're going to use a little bit of body filler to finish out the repair. I'm going to show you some techniques and tips on how to save you some time and some frustration when you're blocking and shaping your repair. I went ahead and sanded this metal with 80 grit sandpaper to smooth it all out. We cleaned it with isopropyl alcohol. Let's go ahead and mix up some body filler. The filler I'm using today is the Evercoat Z-Grit Premium Body Filler. This is a good quality filler. It's not super expensive. It's around $50 a gallon. Now, you might be able to buy this in quarts if you don't have a big project. You could save a little money that way, but I think it's worth spending a little bit of extra money on your filler because the most important thing about your filler is how easy it sands. And this sands very easy. It's not going to frustrate you when you're trying to block out your repair. I've got my filler on my palette. I'm going to lay down some hardener, but I'm not going to mix it up quite yet. You want to wait till you're at your project before you start mixing it up, especially in this heat, because you only have a certain amount of time to work with this filler before it starts to harden. Body filler tends to get everywhere, so before you start laying your filler, take a look at your panel, tape up any gaps. So there's a body gap right at the top of this quarter panel. We want to tape that up. I don't want any filler getting in there. It's going to make it difficult to sand. This way it'll be nice and clean, easy to sand, and I won't have extra work. I'll also tape up at the top of this quarter panel under the tail light so we don't get any filler over that edge. Now we're ready to apply our filler, so I'm going to go ahead and mix up the hardener with the body filler. I like to go around the edge of the filler and fold that hardener into the filler until it's all one uniform color. There's no streaks. Once it's all mixed, we'll put a controllable amount on the end of our spreader and we'll press it into that panel. The first coat you want to press in, get good adhesion between the filler and the metal. I'll spread it over the entire area, and then I'll ease up on my pressure as I'm laying it down and spreading it out smooth. You want to use less pressure as you're applying it and smoothing it out. This will give it the ability to fill those low areas, and you won't be pushing all of the filler out of those low areas. And don't worry if it's not totally smooth, because I'm going to show you a really quick way to shape this body filler and save you a bunch of time. So as this is curing, we want it to set up just a little bit, and then we'll pull this tape and that'll give us a nice clean line. If we pull it too soon, it's going to be wet still and it's going to make a mess. So just start to let it set up and then you can pull the tape. This is a half round body filler rasp, or some people, bodymen, refer to it as a cheese grater, and this is going to help shave down this body filler. We're going to use this to shave down all the excess filler, save us a lot of dust and sanding time. This is the half round version. They do make a flat version, but I find that the flat one tends to dig into the body filler and it's a little bit harder to use. So I use this half round without a tool. They do make a tool that this goes in that you can use to shave down the body filler, but I prefer to use it just as the rasp. Now what we're going to do is we're going to use this to level out this panel, shave down the excess filler. I'm going to use it kind of like a block. I'm going to use it in an X pattern. The ideal time to use this rasp is when that body filler starts to get tacky. You don't want it to be too hard, and obviously you don't want it to be too soft. Now this has really coarse teeth that are one angle, one direction teeth. So you need to flip it around if you go in different directions. So I'm going to, like I said, use it as a block. We'll start shaving it down, and we're not pressing really hard into this panel. We're just letting the teeth do the work and shave that excess filler. By rasping this has helped us flatten and roughen this body filler, and now we can move on to the next step. Here I'm just going to use a little bit of flat black to create a guide coat to help us kind of get an idea of where our high and low areas are as we block sand this. We are going to use 80 grit sandpaper on a long block. Now, when you're using a long block, you want to make sure that block is able to sit flat against that panel. If you have curves or contours in your panel, you want to get a flexible block that'll move with those contours. So it's important to use the right kind of block. I'll start off blocking this with 80 grit sandpaper, and then we'll move through the progression of sandpapers to 180, to 320, and then finally to 600. I'll hold my block flat against the panel, and I'll block it in a crosshatch or X pattern. This is going to be the best way to get this panel straight. As I block this, I'm removing the guide coat, and you can see where any high or low areas are, where any scratches are being left, so you can continue blocking until you get down to those scratches. Now, if you break through into bare metal, then you know that you have a high area there and you need to address that. Either tap down the high, or you may need to add some filler. This is where choosing the right body filler comes into play. If you buy a real inexpensive body filler, you're going to have a hard time sanding and blocking this out. It's going to be more difficult and more frustrating. If you want to check out any of the tools or products I recommend and use, check out my storefront link down in the description. Now I've got the front section pretty much shaped. We're going to move on to the back section, which has a contour that moves around this quarter panel. For that, we're going to use this flexible block with some 80 grit sandpaper. Now I can wrap it around that contour, block this panel straight, and get it shaped and ready for the next step. Now I'm going to sand around the edges of this repair and clean those up. And I'm going to use some 80 and some 180 to clean up those edges, get those ready for the next step. I found the front section of this repair is still wavy and needs some filler, so I went ahead and prepped it out with some 80 grit sandpaper on the Roberlo sander. We cleaned it, and we're going to lay another coat of thin filler in the front portion of this. We'll block that out and get ready for primer. Now our project is ready for some primer. Darius went ahead and masked it off. We are going to use some U-POL 2K urethane primer. This is a direct-to-metal primer. It also can be used as a sealer. It's a budget-friendly primer that sands nice and easy. It mixes up 4-to-1. That's 4 parts primer, 1 part activator. We are going to be using the 3M Performance gun to primer. We're using a 1.4 tip. I've got our volume turned 3 turns out from closed. We've got our air pressure at around 15 psi. I've got Darius practicing primering today. He's going to lay on 2 coats of this 2K urethane primer. We'll put the first coat on, we'll let it flash off for 10 minutes, and then you apply a second coat. Typically 2 coats is probably all you're going to need. Click on this video now and see how we finish this project with a budget paint gun designed for small compressors at home. I appreciate each and every one of you watching, and we'll see you next time on Garage Noise.